The first person in recorded history to ever claim that Earth was anything but the flat, motionless center of the universe was a Greek mathematician and philosopher named Pythagoras of Samos around 500 BC. Interestingly enough, Pythagoras has also been touted by Freemasonic historians such as Albert Mackey, James Anderson, William Hutchinson, and William Preston as being the very first Freemason. Presented more as a thought experiment than a complete cosmology, Pythagoras posited that if the Earth were a spherical globe turning on its vertical axis once per day while revolving annually around a stationary sun, that this model could also equally explain the cyclical motions of the heavenly bodies. This heliocentric model was taught to initiates at Pythagoras's Crotona school, but never became popular or had an influence outside of Greece for another 2,000 years. A century later, another Greek mathematician and philosopher named Plato also espoused a spherical Earth cosmology, except he claimed the Earth globe to be the motionless center of the universe, with the sun, moon, and stars revolving around. His most famous student, Aristotle, also wrote about this geocentric globe-Earth cosmology in his book On the Heavens, offering three main points of evidence for his theory. Firstly, Aristotle noted that when sailing away from an observer on shore, ships approaching the horizon disappeared from view hull before masthead, and he postulated that this occurrence was due to the curvature of the Earth. Aristotle argued that the hull disappeared first because beyond the horizon the globe Earth curved downwards, causing the hull and eventually the masthead and entire ship to drop below the curvature. Today, we can easily prove that Aristotle was incorrect in his assumption by using telescopes, binoculars, and zoom cameras. Once a ship has completely disappeared beyond the horizon, modern technology allows us to zoom in and bring the entire vessel, hull and all, back into full view. This proves that ships do not disappear hull first due to the alleged curvature of the Earth, and that the horizon line is in fact merely the vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view, and not, as Aristotle supposed, the beginning of the Earth's curvature. The horizon is subjective, and varies in distance depending on the weather, the observer's height, and the strength of his eyesight or instruments. As noted previously, the horizon actually rises to the eye of the observer no matter how high he climbs, which also proves that the horizon line is not some objective point of curvature on a convex Earth, but rather the subjective vanishing point of perspective from a given observer's point of view. Aristotle's second point of evidence offered for his spherical Earth theory was the Earth's round shadow cast on the moon during lunar eclipses. To this day, heliocentrists still offer this argument as proof of a spherical Earth, claiming that during lunar eclipses, the Sun, Earth, and Moon align in a perfect 180-degree syzygy like three billiard balls, causing the Sun to cast the Earth's shadow onto the Moon. This clever but faulty assumption is rendered completely invalid, however, due to the fact that lunar eclipses have happened and continue to happen regularly when both the Sun and Moon are still visible together above the horizon. As early as the time of Pliny the Elder, there are records of eclipses happening while both the Sun and Moon were visible in the sky, and continue to be recorded by the Royal Astronomical Society today. Obviously, if the Sun and Moon are both observable simultaneously during an eclipse, then they are not aligned in a 180-degree syzygy, and it is therefore impossible that the Sun could be casting Earth's shadow on the Moon, and some other explanation must be sought. Another explanation, in fact, already existed in many cultures around the world, who posited that a third celestial body known as Rahu, or the Black Sun, also existed, equal in size to the Sun and Moon. This translucent dark body passed affront the Sun and Moon during solar and lunar eclipses, causing their lights to dim. Aristotle's final point of evidence offered for his spherical Earth theory was the appearance of Polaris and other stars to gradually decline overhead as an observer travels southwards. He argued that the gradual declination and eventual disappearance beyond the horizon of certain stars and constellations as one traveled southwards was evidence that the observer was traveling over a convex curved surface. Similar to the ships disappearing over the horizon argument, Aristotle posited that the horizon line was the literal curvature of his spherical Earth, and the stars which declined and disappeared beyond it became invisible because a mass of curved Earth existed between them and the observer. In actual fact, however, the gradual declination of objects in the sky towards the horizon is merely a product of the law of perspective on plane surfaces. As any art student of point perspective knows, the human eye views the world in a pyramidal shape, so that when looking down a long hallway, the floor appears to rise, the ceiling appears to sink, and the walls appear to narrow into a point at the center of the observer's view. Of course, the dimensions of the hallway remain constant for its entire length. The floor does not actually rise, the ceiling does not actually sink, nor do the walls actually close in. But to the human eye, everything is perceived this way. Similarly, when the sun, moon, airplanes, or clouds appear to sink towards the horizon as they move away from us, they are not actually losing altitude and slowly approaching sea level. They are in fact maintaining the same altitude, except they are moving away from you, and so the law of perspective makes them appear to sink.